Welcome back, everybody. New episode Pasty-T Garage coming at you hot with 2004 Ford Focus wagon. Today you might be able to tell by the parts that are sitting on top of the engine, but we're going to be replacing the Serpentine Belt, the belt tensioner, and the Idler Pulley. Now, the kit that I got for this is the Gates kit. You can get it off Amazon, you can get it off Gates' website. It's supposed to be the equivalent of the OEM parts. So what I'm looking for is basically, I want a really good tensioner. Aftermarket tensioners, they could be good. They could also wear out in about 6 months. So we just want to go ahead and replace it with what's considered the original equipment manufacturer's quality. And so that's why we're going to go with the Gates components today. Now, the belt and belt tensioner and all that stuff, they sit along the lines of right here, really close to the passenger wheel well and all that. So what we're going to be doing is removing the coolant reservoir, removing the engine mount that's located right here, and then we'll have more access to these components. Now, the other thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to place a jack underneath the engine oil pan, and we're going to have a block of wood to basically prevent any sort of super high pressure points on the oil pan. The reason we're doing that is because I want to be able to support the engine when we remove the mount, and we might have to move the engine up or down depending on where the bolt locations are. The bolts are a little tricky to get to. Give you an idea. So there's a bolt right here. On the other side of my hand there's another bolt. And those two basically attach to the engine block. The pulley assembly itself, you loosen or tighten with this bolt head right here. This whole piece swivels to apply a constant tension on the serpentine belt itself. Now the idler pulley, which is this right here, this basically just has this bearing, and it has this washer on it, and it has this piece on the back to prevent the bolt itself from falling out. So that's going to be pretty easy to remove. Once we have the belt off, we can just loosen this off, line the other one up, hand thread it on, and then tighten it up. So that's going to do it. So I hope y'all look forward to this journey, and we're going to replace this belt. If you didn't know, I released a video earlier this week basically just showing why we're replacing it. So I've been having an on and off squeak on my belt assembly itself, and it's high time that I just replace the belt and the tensioner just to go ahead and knock it out once and for all. I didn't want to put any sort of belt grease on it because that only masks the problem. If I have a bad tensioner, then I need to replace that as well. So we're going to go ahead and do all that today. Now I've already started removing some of the components. You can see the coolant reservoir, power steering reservoir is out of the way. I do have the bottom of the engine supported by my jack and a block of wood on the oil pan, but I'm going to go ahead and remove these nuts that come off of the engine side of the mount. So the reason that I'm removing this, it's not 100% necessary to remove this mount if you're replacing your belt. The only reason I know that is because I've had to replace a belt on the side of the road. Didn't exactly have all the tools to do that, but this does make it significantly easier to get to all the parts. So we're going to put this down here. We're going to use that later. So here's our idler pulley. So you can see it's a little worn, which could be where our squeak is coming from. The tensioner itself it's really hard to see from here, but basically where that light is, that's the tensioner. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to release tension on this belt, remove it, and then we're going to go ahead and replace the tensioner. It has two bolts that go into there's a bracket and the idler pulley right here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So one tip that I have for everybody is with a blank piece of paper, pencil, pen, whatever you want, go ahead and mark down exactly the way that the belt runs on the engine. Now the way you can do this is you can start with the crankshaft. So we're going to have a big circle down here. We're going to label that CS for crankshaft, and then we're just going to trace all the different pulleys. So we have the tensioner, we have the alternator, we have the idler pulley, we have the power steering pump, the AC bracket, and the water pump pulley. So we're going to go ahead and mark all those down. We got the water pump, we have the power steering, we have the AC bracket, we have the idler, call that I, we have the alternator, A, and then we have the tensioner, T. Now, the way that I do this is basically just we trace it around, so it goes around the crankshaft, it goes around the water pump, and then it goes underneath the tensioner, over the alternator, under the idler pulley, over the power steering pump, and over the AC pulley, goes back around. So, kind of bad drawing, but at least I know where it goes. So we have the crankshaft, and then we just traced it all the way around, just so we can have an over-under idea. So it's a good idea to do this right now, before you pull the belt off. That way, later, when you're trying to put the belt on, you're not like, oh, I don't remember how this goes. Because we're about to release the tension on the belt and pull it off. So you want to go ahead and knock that out before you don't know how the belt necessarily goes. Now that we have the belt diagram mapped out, the new tensioner is a 15. You can test that right here. The old one may or may not be a 15. Feels a little loose, so we're going to go ahead and try a 14. Alright, 14 is the ticket. So the belt is only, or the tensioner is only going to move one way. And then once you release some pressure on it, you can slide it off a non-grooved pulley, such as the idler pulley. We're just going to walk it off all the way. And then we're just going to pull it out. Probably difficult to see, but removing the belt from the engine is the easy part. Now, old belt. Now, my belt doesn't necessarily have worn grooves. It's not cracked. It's just been making an excessive amount of noise. You can almost tell where it's been wearing, almost like it's been riding heavily on a pulley that hasn't been moving. So what we're going to do is just check to make sure all of our pulleys are free. We're going to put the old belt away. So we're just going to spin each of the pulleys, make sure they spin freely. Obviously we're not going to be able to spin the crankshaft, because that would be the whole rotating assembly. But we're just going to spin the rest of them to make sure that they're free. Because if we had a seized up pulley, that could definitely cause a belt squeal, definitely cause premature wear on the belt. All of our pulleys spin very freely, including the tensioner. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and remove the idler pulley. Feels like it's a 13. Alright, definitely 13 wrench. Shoot, that is tight. Okay, broke free. Yeah, so once you basically break the idler pulley free, it should be able to spin free by hand. We're going to go ahead and loosen it by hand. Now this may be a part that you have to jack the engine up all the way, because you see that bolt's about to hit the frame. So we're going to go ahead and jack the engine up some more, just to make sure that that bolt clears the frame. Now you don't want to go crazy jacking up your engine, because remember, it's still attached at two other points. And things will start to break if you pull them away. Okay, so idler pulley is out. It looks extremely worn. I mean, it's probably the original one to the engine, so not that surprised that this worn. But good thing we're replacing it. So yeah, there's a lot. It might be hard to see, but there is a lot of caked on rubber and oil on here. So it could be that we've been having this belt problem for a while. It's a good thing we're replacing it now. So yeah, so we're going to go ahead and take our old pulley, put it away. We're going to grab a new pulley. We're going to go ahead and install it. Now again, should be very easy to hand thread. Since I hand threaded that out all the way. I'm going to tighten this all the way in. Once it's butted up, I'll go ahead and use my 13 to tighten it all the way. There we go. Now again, there are torque specs for all of this. So consult your Haynes, Chilton's, Ford manual if you have any questions about how tight to make things. Alright, so we're going to verify that the pulley spins freely once we install it, because if it's bound, obviously that's going to create more issues when we reinstall the belt. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and remove the tensioner itself. Now, the tensioner has two 10mm bolts that connect it to the engine. Both of them I'm going to get with a 1/4" ratchet and a extension. I have my 1/4" ratchet. Might be able to get it with this. I doubt it. Might be too tight. Oh, never mind. Okay, that's one loose. Sheesh. It's a little tight, which is fine. We're gonna go ahead and take the idler pulley back off. Okay, now that we got the idler pulley out of the way, we can go ahead and get these 10mm with no obstruction. There we go. Now we got it broken free. We can use our wobble socket and tenon extension to just remove the bolts the rest of the way. And then once they're broken free, you'll probably be able to remove them by hand. Again, it's going to be tough to see because I'm kind of at a weird angle, but... So if you can see down there, there's the pulley, and then the two bolts are basically above it. I'll pull it out and show y'all the orientation. Okay, we are reusing these bolts because the new pulley does not come with bolts, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the bolts. Now, if they were seized or cross-threaded or something like that, number one, you would have bigger issues. Number two, you would just get new bolts. Alright, so basically how it sat against the block, these two holes were sitting up against it like that. So this is the old one. You see all the rubber from it squealing. It's pretty dirty. So we're going to replace it. Again, we're going to put this down here. Make sure the bolt holes are free and clear. Got our new pulley. We're going to hand thread the bolt that's further away. Actually, we're going to hand thread the one that's closer, and then we're going to swing it up and hand thread the other one. Alright, so this seems like it's a little bit thicker because it's not pulling. I'm not able to shove it in the same way I was able to pull the other one out, so we're going to have to walk around the alternator a little bit. It's good. Hopefully this new tensioner is a little bit more robust. Hold a stronger tension on the belt so that it doesn't get loose and squeal. Okay, so we got one bolt threaded in. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and try to feed it in and then pick it up and then thread it while it's picked up into its home. Thankfully, it's really easy to feel when you have it correctly in there, and then you can kind of back out and visually check to make sure that it's properly seated. There are only two holes that this can orient. Alright, now that those are hand threaded most of the way, I'm going to go ahead and finish it up with my 1/4" ratchet. Go ahead and put some torque on it. Alright, that is installed. We're going to go ahead and reinstall our idler pulley. Again, we're going to hand thread it all the way until it's butted up, and then we're going to tighten it with our 13mm wrench. Okay, that's on. Good one. Alright. Okay, now the difficult part, which is getting our belt on. Now, this is where having the diagram ready will be handy. So we're going to go ahead and resort to our diagram. Now, the best advice I can give is line up all of your pulleys with the belt, except for one of them that has a flat side, not the ribbed side, because that's going to be the easiest one to slip over once you have your tensioner loosened. So we're going to go ahead and go underneath. Get the crank first, since we're doing this from the top. I did go ahead and pull my wheel off in case I needed to get underneath and I just needed more visual aid to get. But what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it around the crank. We're going to wrap it around the AC pulley down there. We're going to pick it up and wrap it around the power steering. Again, this takes a little bit of trial and error just because it's a lot of feeling for what you need to fit. So it goes around the crank up, and then it goes up around the water pump pulley, which is this one. Again, this might be really hard to see. A whole lot of light in here. And then it goes down around the tensioner. Doesn't want to push past the tensioner. I'm going to use my extension to just kind of be an extra force to push it beyond the tensioner itself because it's getting stuck. There we go. Alright, so now we almost have it routed around everything but the idler pulley. So we're going to go ahead and make sure all the grooves are lined up, make sure it's in the grooves. If not, it'll be a little harder to line it up on the idler pulley itself. So it looks like everything's okay but the power steering pump or the AC. Okay, so now that we have everything on there, you can see I still have quite a bit of room before I can get it underneath the idler pulley. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our 15, which is the new tensioner, and we're going to get it on the bolt head. And once we're going to loosen it while holding the belt down so we can walk it onto this idler pulley. Now you might have to find a good position to get the wrench or whatever your supplied loosening mechanism is. They do make belt tools that are like a really long, basically a long box end. Alright, so as you can see, it took quite a bit of ingenuity to get the belt around all of it. Like I said, the belt's tight, the tensioner's tight. I don't think it's on my crank pulley all the way. It may be. It just looks like it's not quite seated in the groove. So I'm going to double check that. But that is the installation of the belt. The only thing we need to do is retrieve my wrench because it's kind of stuck. I can probably push it out. Retrieve my wrench. There we go. Double check our guide, make sure that we put everything back the way it was, reinstall our reservoirs, and basically button up any other thing, install the engine mount, and then start it up and make sure that everything's running right. So for those that you're curious, I do have an engine mount video. I'll go ahead and link that. But the bolts, or I'm sorry, the nuts that go on these star bolts closer to the engine, those are 18. The other ones that go into the side of the vehicle are 15. I'm going to go ahead and lower the engine. That was a little fast. I'm going to go ahead and raise it back up, just in case it's not seated 100%. I'll make sure the bolts line up. And I'm just hand threading these in just to make sure that they seat correctly before I start cranking down with my 3/4 inch ratchet. Again, these are 15s. So I'm just gonna thread them a little bit, still have the engine a little jacked up, just to make sure that there's no binding. Now I'm going to lower the engine all the way. Okay. Remove my jack, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten these all the way. Alright, those are done. I'm going to go ahead and move my reservoirs back. Power steering one just slides into place. It's got little feet. You just want to make sure to find their home. Just push it down. The coolant reservoir has a little spot in the back that it slaps onto. And then it's got a 10mm nut that it fixes on. And that is this. Everything's buttoned up. So we're going to go ahead and start the car just as it sits right now, just to make sure that everything's good, make sure there's no belt squeal, make sure that all the pulleys have the belt riding correctly into it. And then that's going to be it. We're going to go ahead and put our wheel back on. We ended up not needing it off, but always a good idea to have as much room and visual indication as possible. And we're going to lower the vehicle down. Alright everybody, so that's going to finish up this episode of Pasty-T Garage. Again, we worked on a 2004 Ford Focus wagon. We replaced the Serpentine Belt, and then underneath there you have your tensioner and your idler pulley. And we went ahead and just checked to verify that our repair was good. We started it up, no squeals. The belt did not slip off. Everything is riding in the grooves as intended. So, mission success. So that's going to do it for me today. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. If you like the video, hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed, I'd really appreciate it if you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And that's going to do it for me today. So I appreciate everybody coming on this journey with me. Again, we replaced the belt, the tensioner, and the idler pulley on a 2004 Ford Focus wagon. That's going to do it for me today.